is a local resident producers program. The program content is the sole responsibility of the producer and does not necessarily reflect the views or policies of CATV2, Oshkosh Community Access Television, the City of Oshkosh, the Oshkosh Cable Television Advisory Commission, or Time Warner Cable.
Hi everyone, welcome to another edition of Eye on Oshkosh. I'm Cheryl Hentz along with my co-host Tony Palmeri. On this edition we're very pleased to welcome to the show two people who work in the arts in our local area. To my left is Susan Stockton. She is with the Performing Arts Center, the Fox Cities Performing Arts Center up in Appleton. And also joining us this evening is Joe Ferlo. He is with the Grand Opera House right here in Oshkosh. So thanks to both of you for being here.
Thanks for having us.
It's a real pleasure to have you both here, both for the very first time. So, one of the things that we really want to focus on tonight is there's a really exciting program coming up called Shakespeare and the Fox, and we want to spend some time talking about that. But we also want to talk about arts in general and how performing arts centers, rely really on funding from a variety of sources, sometimes communities, sometimes corporations, what have you. So we'll get into that a little later. But let's start with Shakespeare and the Fox. What is it? How did it begin? Tell us about how this evolved.
This really started out of the University of Wisconsin-Oshkosh with some of the English professors deciding that it would be a great opportunity to link communities together. So they actually talked about perhaps there could be a residency with a major acting company. At the time they talked about the Royal Shakespeare Company. And this would be an opportunity for the university to connect some elder hostel programs or some senior citizen programs, their education community, just a wide variety of compartments within the university structure, and to link with us as possibly the performance site. And I came on board about a year after some conversations had started, and I thought, well, that's a great project. Let's just see how we can start to develop this. So we thought we would start small, get our toe in the water, get used to working with each other, try to find ways that we could kind of build our community's awareness and appreciation for Shakespeare. I think that some people know and love it, and there are others that say, well, geez, what is Shakespeare about, and why is this of interest to me? So we decided to form this kind of working unit and brought Joe on board with the Grand Opera House and our facility and the University of Wisconsin-Oshkosh and different departments within the university. And now we've added Fond du Lac and the Oneida Nation program, arts program. So we've got this along the Fox River group of presenters interested in this performing Shakespeare. And our goal is to try to make Shakespeare kind of a member of our community, tailgate Shakespeare, and really make it fun. And we've identified a company from London, England, who have a very special production of The Tempest. And this production is very site-specific. It can go anywhere, and we liked the symmetry and the idea that this performance could actually plots its way along the river going north. And so we're starting as far south as Fond du Lac and then going up to the Menominee Reservation and doing a performance on the powwow grounds. So there will be performances at the University of Oshkosh, and we'll be doing a one-man show probably at the Grand Opera House and performing in our facility and some downtown facilities on somebody's organic farm. So it's kind of a eclectic kind of thing. So it started to just be this project to try to culminate in a multi-week residency and try to get as many people kind of interested in Shakespeare. And because this performance is actually sited so that the audience is sitting on these oil drums with little cork pads on them, and they've kind of become their own Tempest Island. And the actors actually do the show all through the audience. So the audience is really part of this whole environment.
Now that's going to be 2007, right?
That's the fall of 2007. Every year we've been doing American Players Theater, presenting them at our facility, and they do residency activities here in Oshkosh as well as up in Appleton. And that's kind of been the through line program that's done on an annual basis, all trying to get a structure together so that we culminate in performances in the fall of 2007 with a 2-week residency.
Well, let's talk about the beginning. I mean, Joe, didn't this start in October of 2000 and Romeo and Juliet was the first show?
Romeo and Juliet was
Okay.
the first show, and that was our production,
Okay.
UWO production up at the PAC in the Kimberly Clark Theater.
Okay.
And the idea for us at the Grand, certainly, and indeed as partners, is that together we can do so much more for the region than we could as individuals.
Sure.
I know we keep falling back into the 2000s, the next year's program a little bit, but it's a great example of something that no single entity, probably not even Susan's
No.
theater with its resources, could do.
Exactly.
And together we can do that and bring it out to the region. When we were brought in, truthfully, it wasn't me that was brought in. It was just before I got here, and,
Oh,
and
that's
I
right,
basically arrived, and they said, "You're going to go to this meeting for this partnership with the UW and the PAC." And I went, "Cool, great idea. We'll see how that goes." And we went into the room, and what struck me was the idea that at that time it was at the APT phase, and they've been very good about working things. We can't. Our two venues, the two principal venues, and it can't do the same performance.
Sure.
Not just because we're close, but I mean, anyone who has seen a performance in the Grand and a performance at the PAC know that they're two very distinctly different experiences. That Romeo and Juliet wouldn't have worked on the Grand stage. Worked great there. So APT crafted something that would work for us. The first year, actually, it was UW that crafted something. It was a performance called Love's Fire, and we did that at the Grand. And the idea was to take different performances and raise the collective awareness of Shakespeare, which technically, historically, has been drama for the people.
Exactly.
So
Exactly.
the appeal for me was that it would enable me here in our community to bring something that we certainly I couldn't have done alone.
Sure.
And together the program just continues to grow.
Well, what was the response to Shakespeare in the early productions like Romeo and Juliet? Did the Fox Valley seem to take to this? Susan?
Oh yes, very much. And what was neat is that we actually tied into the curriculums of both UW-Oshkosh and Lawrence University so that we were able to get large groups of students to come to the performances. So we went from having your group of 700, 750 Shakespeare diehards to 2,000.
Wow.
Okay, so you had lots of students from each one of the institutions, and it was really kind of a neat experience to be able to have the students kind of share the experience as a regular theater goer. So we didn't group them all together, we put them all throughout the audience. The audience loved it because they're like, wow, there's all these young people here and they're interested in Shakespeare. This is really cool. So it really just became this really neat, kind of growth, and we finally were feeling that our efforts were being rewarded.
Yeah.
And the students had a really great time. We got, good reports from them, and they really enjoyed coming to the PAC and going to Joe's venue and getting to see kind of some behind the scenes as well as what was on stage.
The funny thing is, people often, and I did when I was a kid, felt Shakespeare was kind of inaccessible.
Right.
It was too wordy. It was too hard to understand.
Yeah.
I didn't wanna- and yet the themes and the stories themselves
Sure.
were written for all of us.
That's
And so it's really kind of
Absolutely.
gratifying to
Yeah.
get people to step past that barrier where they think, I'm not going to understand it, and I don't want anybody to see that I don't understand it,
Yeah.
And they
Right.
get past that, and you see them actually having a good time, and they're getting it, they're understanding the humor, and then they go, I'd like to see that. Now then they start saying things like, well, when are you going to do Midsummer Night's Dream, or when are you going to do, The Tempest, or
Yeah.
I really think I'd like this one, and people are actually starting to request Shakespeare, which is just an amazing thing. And for us to have, we've had our role at the Grand has been to do the kind of the offbeat. The Love's Fire was Shakespeare sonnets interpreted by modern playwrights. Last year we did a behind the scenes look with an actor who had played a Shakespearean character, and he literally donned he did his whole history of his career as a Shakespearean performer, dealing with all of these things. and literally to his role as a Shakespearean actor. Next year, who knows what happens? You know, it's really kind of a cool interactive Shakespeare experience.
Exactly.
Now, this started a year ago. You still have some things going on this month and through the balance of this year, I believe, and then there will be more things going on starting next year in the fall. So why don't we talk a little bit about what's going on still this month and the balance of this year? What's on deck?
I guess ours is the first.
Yes.
We opened the Shakespeare on the Fox with something called The Trial of the Happy Dagger Company. And it's the American Players Theater, and they've set up a courtroom drama, kind of like, you know, Boston Legal or The Practice. And in this particular courtroom, it's the families of Romeo and Juliet putting on trial the manufacturer of the dagger.
Wow.
So it takes kind of this modern litigious, is that the right word?
Yeah.
Kind of approach. But the characters, the defendants, the folks who are testifying are, you know, the Juliet's nurse and the parents of the two families. So they've done this marvelous job of taking this kind of,
Wonderful.
this really accessible kind of courtroom drama that we've grown so accustomed to and applying it to the Shakespearean story.
Now that's on October 15th.
That's correct.
And at the Grand.
At the Grand, 7:30 p.m.
7:30, and the ticket prices?
I don't know. I'll look, though. You caught me by surprise.
Oh, sorry.
The general admission prices, they're $15
Okay.
for seats for adults, anywhere you sit in the theater, and $10 for students.
$10 for students, $15 for adults, and those can be purchased in advance of the show.
They can be.
At the box office?
At the box office or online at grandoperahouse.org.
All right, grandoperahouse.org. All right, the next show?
Next show
I
is
October
don't
19th?
have prices. I'm going to get shot
That's
when I
okay.
get back home. But we're on October 19th. We have the performance of American Players Theater doing the full Romeo and Juliet. And I had the opportunity to see this a few weeks ago down in their home camp, and it's a terrific production. And I think one that people will really be able to relate to and enjoy. David Frank, the artistic director, was the director for this particular production. And it's really very well done and very delightful and has a lot of interesting things. And I think the sword fighting in particular is really interesting in this one, the way that they've dealt with it.
Are American Players Theater actors, I guess you call them equity actors? They are. So these are,
Equity and some that are training to get their equity card.
Right.
But they've been there all summer, and for some of them, obviously, some of the seasoned vets have been there for many years. But they work in repertory all summer doing several shows. So the actors, everybody that we have is very, very experienced.
okay. Is there a website people can go to for more information?
Yes, www.foxcitiespac.com.
Okay, Fox Cities, one word.
Yes.
FoxCitiesPAC.com.
Yes.
And there they can find all the ticket prices. and all
Absolutely.
that.
Everything is there.
All right.
The other thing,
Yeah.
too, to mention is that for the first time we've been able to involve the Fox Valley Symphony, and they're doing Prokofiev's Romeo and Juliet. So there's an opportunity for some students, and some students are taking advantage of this, where there's an opportunity to see the play and then to kind of hear an interpretation, symphonic interpretation. And Brian Groner, who is the conductor for Fox Valley Symphony, is going to be doing the number on stage and then talking
Wow.
with the students a little bit about the piece and its genesis.
Now that's on November 3rd.
Yes.
November 3rd is for music fans, I guess, who want to see this.
Well, actually, the November 3rd is the daytime performance for kids,
Okay.
but on the next night, November 4th, is the open performance to all of the people in the Valley and beyond who want to come and see the full symphony concert, but one of the featured piece is Prokofiev's Romeo and Juliet.
Wonderful.
And tied in with this is there are some workshop activities
Yes,
going on
APT
too.
actually, probably as we speak, and last week and next week, they kind of infiltrate the community and have different members of their company go to different schools to do workshops. So some of it might be an acting workshop or directing workshop, or something that tries to get the kids set context for the play, or make them a little bit more comfortable with the Shakespearean language. And so they'll do workshops, and that is usually kind of about a week and a half process, some before the production, some after the production.
Okay. And again, for the viewers, APT, you're going to hear us refer to that.
Yeah.
That stands for American Players Theater. So
Yeah.
just don't be thrown by that.
How many
not-
seats do you have at the PAC that would be able to see this?
We have 2,073.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay. That's huge venue.
Yes. Yes.
Is there an expectation that you would actually sell?
Well, last
sell
year
those?
we had 2,000, and actually the number was precisely, and I called the box office person and I said, are you sure this is really 2,000? Because I don't usually see a box office number that says exactly 2,000. But we had exactly 2,000 people last year see the production that we did of Macbeth.
Incredible.
Wow.
Yeah.
Um,
So we're hoping for those numbers again.
All right.
Yes.
Are these, and the answer to this is probably yes, are these big budget productions? You know, you hear Shakespeare, you think lots of actors, elaborate costumes. Are
Oh,
these,
yeah.
these are very, so
Yeah.
are the ticket prices alone, the ticket revenue paying for all this?
No, we subsidize
Okay.
anything that kind of comes into the cultural vein. And I would say to you that American Players Theater is not, they certainly charge a reasonable fee for what they do, but they also raise money to tour.
They do.
So in the
All right.
arts, everything is fundraised, every element of it.
Yeah.
The actual company is raising money to be able to be on the road. We raise money to support the performance, to be able to have it only cost
Gotcha.
whatever low ticket price, I cannot remember at the moment, whatever that price is. So everything's kind of underwritten. Every step along the way is underwritten activity. So all of the workshops that they do in all of the communities, they have to raise money to support that activity
All right.
to be able to be there because they're paying the equity actors to do the workshops.
Joe, how many seats are at the Grand?
660.
All right. And is there an expectation that you fill those up for Shakespeare, or have you?
No, no, there's not an expectation, and no, we haven't filled it up yet. I think for us at the Grand, it's going to be a series of degrees. I think we had somewhere in the neighborhood of 200. The Grand's a funny hall, funny in the sense that there are actually fewer seats downstairs than there are upstairs. So when you get about 300 people, the downstairs starts to feel full. And being in older halls, sometimes it's a little more difficult to put folks to climb those stairs. So I guess if I had an expectation, I'd look for 200 to 300 for this year, and see that as a real good stepping stone for a show that really is more folks embracing a concept than it is embracing a title.
Okay, gotcha. Because isn't it difficult to market Shakespeare in the Fox Valley? I mean, you both said that we've had some good turnouts and people have been enthusiastic. But on the other hand, this area is not known for supporting that kind of art. So, I mean, what have been the challenges to promoting it?
I think, first of all, overcoming expectation. The expectation that it's some kind of elite or,
Yeah,
or
see, that's the
high,
thing, right.
or high
See, that-
entertainment.
Okay.
That's a marketing issue not only for Shakespeare but for any performance arts, I think.
Yeah, whether you're in Oshkosh or New York City.
Exactly.
Exactly.
And here, I know Susan, I'm sure, has done her same diligence in Appleton as I do in Oshkosh. I work very hard every day to make sure that folks feel that the performances at the Grand are accessible, whether they're Shakespeare or whether it's River Pants,
Exactly.
not
Exactly.
River Dance, River Pants.
Yes.
No matter what it is, that it's accessible in a different way to a different audience.
Sure.
Yeah.
But the hardest part of promoting Shakespeare is the man's name is almost a detriment. If I said we were going to have a courtroom drama and these families were going to do the going to duke it out over
Yeah.
the weapon, I might have an easier time than if I said it was a Shakespeare-based production. So
They hear Shakespeare, they think elite. I'm not going to
they're
understand.
not going to understand it, and or worse yet, someone is going to see me not understand it. I know I said that before,
Yeah.
but it really merits to say it again. It's I think the single most difficult thing about presenting Shakespeare
Yeah.
for me.
And I think that's one of the reasons we were really excited about this A&BC company coming from London, because their approach is so human, practical, direct, and it brings Shakespeare right into the people. And all of a sudden you start hearing, when professional actors really have command of the Shakespearean language, you hear the sentences spoken and you really understand it. And all of a sudden, the these, thous, and the wherefores, you don't hear them the same way. You really hear what they're trying to say. So I think that this is really the nuts and bolts of why we think we have to do this project, and we have to do it out in a farm that's plowed the field in a circle so that we can have people there, and
With
they're
the
in a
actors
very
among them.
naturally in a natural setting, and they're actually focusing on the work, and it's not you know, kind of the proscenium arch and a theater, and you know. So when we do it in our venue, we're actually going to do it on stage. So not the house. The house
Sure.
is dark. We're going to have the actors and the audience physically on stage to watch the performance, and that will be kind of a kick and a thrill to.
There's a certain
Yeah,
irony
stage.
that, you know, when we're in school and we're studying Shakespeare, you get the thing in front of you. And we want to study Shakespeare. We want our kids to study Shakespeare. We want them to experience Shakespeare. We get the thing in front of us and we're like, da 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 da
Yeah,
da 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 da, and then we just fall into that, and you go, I don't understand this. But when you go and you see it performed by folks who know what they're doing, and
Oh,
they've got
yeah.
the cadence, and they've got, you go, oh, I know what's happening, you know, and that's where, you know, we talk about the value of the arts and of performance art. It's so much easier to watch Shakespeare than it is to read Shakespeare.
Well, and to this point, though, I mean, this is why Denzel Washington did Julius Caesar on Broadway last year. He wanted to bring a whole new crop of people that would come to see him. And oh, by the way, yes, it was Shakespeare. But you had people in the, I mean, I go to the theater in New York all the time. I see all of the Broadway shows, and I'm sitting in the audience thinking, whoa, this is a whole different audience. These people were kind of talking and saying, oh, can you believe he said that? What's going on here? What's going on there? And they were genuinely jazzed by the production. So you know that it's possible to reach into somebody else's world and to grab them with what the message is for the play.
Absolutely.
So, you know, it just took a little bit of that star power to make that happen.
Sure, but knowing what the challenges are of marketing something like this, and of course, you know, once they're there and they're seeing the performance,
Yeah.
you know, everybody gets it, like you
Yeah,
said, Joe. But
yeah.
but the difficulty is getting them there,
Yeah.
and you guys know what the challenges are before you even begin. So where do you begin to market this?
Well, this is actually interesting because I kind of, you know, this is almost like this big snowball that started small and it just keeps getting bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger. And the way that we're approaching this is not so much slapping the posters up, taking the TV ad, or putting the newsprint ad and saying, here, come, we want you to come. We're actually infiltrating the community this year with all of our education and outreach systems and distribution systems, if you will. So the Fox Valley, the Rotary, the Multicultural Center has got this diversity circle system where they've got all these people networked to talk about topics and issues. So we're going to have them network and talk about the issues that are raised in the Tempest. So that's kind of a system that all of a sudden gets all these people together. And then as a result of that, they want to come and see the performance. Well, this is really cool. We've been talking about the issues. I want to go and see the performance where this is all played out. So it's this other way of doing it rather than I'm going to the theater to see Shakespeare, you know, or experience Shakespeare. And we've got high school students through the Renaissance School up in Appleton who are going to work with the text and become kind of the ambassadors going into the schools and up to the Indian reservation and into elder communities and talking about the play, doing little scenes from it, trying to introduce people to the context and the themes for the play. And so then all those are like kind of using the farming metaphor, planting seeds, and then you start having people's interest grow, and then they start to say, well, we want to see this. So I'm hoping that the problem is how do we keep people at bay because we've got so many people that want to come.
Marketing the arts has changed a lot in the 20 some odd years that I've been trying to do it. It used to be you put up the posters, you put out the ads, you appeared in the media however you could, and you tried to convince people to come. More than ever now, it's all about word of mouth.
Oh.
It's all about getting people to talk about what it is you're doing. Hey, I'm going to go to the Grand to see this thing.
Yeah.
You want to go?
Yeah.
Just the idea of the concept of going out and making that a destination, whether it's here or whether it's there, it's a whole different idea now than it used to be. And when folks try to, when they rent the hall and they want to do a show, and their first thought is, okay, I got to get those posters up, and I've got to get. I said, no, you got to get people talking about what it is you're doing.
It's kind of ironic because word of mouth is very low tech
Yeah.
promotion.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, you'd think that we'd all be flush because we just put our efforts into
Yeah.
word of mouth, and
Yeah.
it would be no problem.
And it is true because I find with the Grand that if you can just get someone to go once,
Yeah.
they go back again.
Yeah.
I mean, it's such a beautiful building.
It's all about the experience. It's we just did a show. We opened with Jeff Daniels, and 2 weeks before, nothing. I don't want to say nothing. We had respectable 350 seat houses for the 2 shows, and then people started talking. Because people started to say, "Oh, it's Jeff Daniels. It's the Dumb and Dumber guy. It must be sold out, right?"
Yeah.
And I'm like,
Right.
"No,
No,
Right.
no." The
That's
math was
that's
working
the-
against us.
Yeah.
And as soon as we got people turned
Yeah.
around to realize that there were still tickets to be had,
wow.
both those shows sold out. But it happened in the last 2 weeks, and it happened because people were talking, and that's what
That's
this
what
whole
ages
program
us
is.
in this
We-
business, though. It's always, but people buy later also now. I
Right.
mean, they just naturally do because they're trying to figure out what their schedule is going to be, and they're leaving their options open, and then all of a sudden, you'll sell as many tickets in the 72 hours prior to the performance as you've sold in your entire preseason lead up to selling.
I got to ask this. These are both non-smoking venues. Can't smoke in the Grand.
Correct.
Can't smoke in the PAC.
Correct.
Right. Alcohol.
We serve it in the lobby.
Okay.
You can't bring it into the hall.
Before
but-
the show.
Right, before the show, and
Okay.
during the intermission, although I can't recall whether there's an intermission for this specific show.
Okay. At the PAC.
Yep.
Okay. And the reason why I bring that up is because I've had students tell me that the problem with the Grand is that they think it's not an alcoholic type of event. I mean, it's like you go to the Leach Amphitheater,
Right.
right?
Oh, yeah.
And I'm thinking, well, the Grand is not really the kind of place where you want to drink it. I mean, they're not really drinking performances,
Right.
right?
But you know what? Sometimes if you have, Arlo Guthrie or Leo Kottke
Yeah,
coming
exactly.
in, you want to be, and we do struggle with that because although you can't bring the beverage into the theater, that's pretty standard in many theaters. We have a full liquor license. Not only can you get a beer, you can get a mixed drink.
Yeah, exactly.
But what we've done, when we did
age.
Guys on Ice, which
Yeah.
was kind of a breaking show for us in the time that I was here, we sold out 2 performances, and my whole point of that was it was a show about ice fishing and drinking beer, and you come in your flannel shirt and you drink your. It was the musical for guys who hate musicals.
Okay.
And then once they get in the door, as you said, and they go, "Oh, I can have a beer." Shakespeare is much more pleasant if I can have a beer.
Yeah, exactly.
Sitting through a show is much more, and then before you know it, they become regulars, and the show happens. And,
Absolutely.
So it is. You're right on, because all of the studies I've seen now say that for most of the audiences, it's not. It's kind of a disconcerting study. It's not about what they're watching.
Right.
It's about the
it's
experience
the
of
whole
going
experience,
out.
yeah.
And if
Yeah.
you can create an entire experience, a little mini destination, which would include.
Well, I wish we can get more people to go to your venues, because some people will spend $7.50 for a movie theater ticket, another $7.50 for a Coke and a popcorn.
It's more than that, Tony.
more
Right.
Exactly.
Okay, so you spend $15 to $20 just to watch a movie,
Yeah.
right, for one person. For $15, you can see a great show at
Yeah.
the Grand and experience a different kind of,
Right.
of art. Have the local press, especially the print media, been good about reviewing shows? That's one thing that I've thought has not helped, let's say. That Jeff Daniels comes, for example, and the day after, do you see a nice review of the show?
Did you have a review?
Typically not.
Yeah, see
Our
that?
local policy, as I understand it, is that if it's not a multi-day event,
Yeah.
Yeah.
that they won't review it because the event
That's the
has
Grand
happened.
Opera House's policy?
No, the policy
The
of
media.
the local media.
Oh, okay.
As I understand it. And I've experienced that. I experienced that in Manitowoc before here. I understand it to a degree, and yet at the same time, I do think there's an intrinsic value to saying there was a great thing
Yes.
here, and it's too bad you
Yeah.
missed it.
Yeah.
Yeah. The Journal
No.
Sentinel regularly reviews shows at the Pabst and the
Yeah.
Riverside
Yeah.
Theater. Do you get reviews
Even
of
for
shows?
single nights?
I think I've seen concert reviews,
Okay.
Regularly.
Well, that's a single usually.
single night,
Yeah.
right? So, or
Where we-
sometimes they do a very big build up before
Right.
before the show. Now
Yeah.
you have that sometimes.
That happens on
Features.
time from
Okay.
time. Yes, that can
Yeah.
happen.
Do you get reviews of your shows?
We get reviews for Broadway shows because they're there
Okay.
for a week.
Okay.
We sometimes, I think, when we had the Care Off Orchestra, actually somebody did a review and sent it into the paper, which they did print.
Oh,
And I think part of it has to do with our local paper maybe not having the perceived expertise for somebody who could review opera, could review ballet, could review orchestra, et cetera, because I think it really does take a breadth
That could
and
be
depth.
that could be a factor here
So
too. I
I
hadn't
think
thought
that
of
that's
that. But
that's kind of an issue.
does-
But
one thing that has happened from time to time now, and I hope it continues to happen, is when a show really does energize, occasionally you'll see an op-ed piece that
Yeah.
will say,
Yeah.
"Hey, it's wonderful that wasn't it great that this was going on here or this was going on here." Whether it was so and so at the Leach or so and so at the PAC or at the Grand. And sometimes it's like, don't say there's nothing to do because there was this.
Exactly.
And if you didn't go to any of it, you missed it.
yeah.
Exactly.
That there is a value to that, and,
Exactly.
and you'll hope to see more of that.
Right.
But just as a community service, and you've got such a wide variety of faculty at the university, just as a community service type thing, the local papers could draw on the resources at the university. I'm sure that someone there understands opera
Oh, yeah.
and would be willing to, you give them a comp ticket in addition to, in exchange for them writing a review for the paper.
Right.
I'm sure that something like that could be worked out.
I think so too. One last thing on the Shakespeare and the Fox. Is there an expectation this will go beyond 2007?
Oh, absolutely. We're actually looking at this next wave. We're hoping it goes on forever, number one.
Sure.
But right now we're involved with putting together a grant request to the National Endowment for the Humanities for a 3-year project. So that this company will come in and do The Tempest in the fall of '07. In the fall of '08, we will expand the project that we typically do with American Players Theater. And then in the fall of '09, this company will come back with a production of Winter's Tale, which is actually kind of interesting because it involves the audience starting out in the seats watching, and then at intermission they're invited up on stage as part of the action with what's going on with the play, and then the play starts to unfold back in the theater, but the audience remains on stage. So this particular director is very much about bringing people into the play's context and really making them a part of it. So this is like a whole other way to experience Shakespeare. So we've got this 3-year project that we're tailoring with all of these other subsets. Community outreach programs. There's a website that's being developed by UWO that's going to have interactive capabilities and will kind of trail the project and have a lot of background. Academic symposiums will happen. So this is a very large project with a large grant request. The NEH, I should say, did fund us getting together a consultancy group with experts and all of the participating partners to talk about how we could best give this thing some mileage in our community. So we're hopeful that the money will come for this big 3-year project.
It's really kind of a feather. I mean, I suppose I am tooting our horn when I say this, but
You can toot.
there's a lot of in our business. There are a lot of situations like ours, the large PAC and the small community-based PAC, and very rarely do they seem to get along. There's this
Yeah.
this kind of David and Goliath mentality when in reality we're doing such very different things. And there's so much strength in acknowledging that what we do is different and together we can do more.
Sure.
And the more people who are going to the arts in the valley, the more people are supporting the arts in general.
Exactly.
It's easier for me to convince someone who has seen Lion King to come and see Forbidden Broadway.
Yep.
There's a real value to that, and in a small way, I'd like to think that we with the university and now the Windover Center and the Oneida Nation and the other partners who are coming in on board the symphonies, we're starting to create a model that says to our counterparts in other areas of the state, yes, there's a way to work together for the greater good,
Absolutely.
and competitive. There's only a competition if we're showing the exact same thing on the exact same night and looking for the exact same audience. That doesn't happen. So I'd like to think that the project needs to continue because it's starting to not only to do great things for the arts scene in our area, but
Absolutely.
because it's a good example of how to do things.
Is seeking out grant dollars a big part of what you do? I mean, you said you're applying for the NEH grant,
Yeah, I think we all, it is.
and that's
I mean, it's one sliver
All right.
of a bigger funding pie.
all right.
And we wouldn't normally apply to the NEH because we're more performing based. We also apply to the NEA, but the NEH, because they kind of consider Shakespeare their guy.
Yeah.
It gives us an opportunity to kind of expand the funding pool. And this is a sizable amount of money that we're going for, and it's a sizable project. So for a project like this, you normally would see where else you can find some funding.
Sure.
And by the same token, National Endowment of the Arts or National Endowment of the Humanities, those are both grants that the Grand Opera House on its own, we wouldn't write. There's no single program
Really?
within our community that would be recognized at that level. But this regional project, that makes the radar screen, and that becomes something that's appealing to on a national level for a lot of different reasons.
Well, and it raises everybody's profile as an organization. You know, so then in Joe's annual report, if this all comes to pass, he's able to talk about this project, their involvement in it, and the fact that they were part of a recipient for receiving national dollars. That's a huge accolade for all of our individual programs.
Sadly, Tony, though, if I understood kind of where you were going with the question, grant funding is not a panacea for the arts.
No.
It's a very small overall percentage of the fundraising. Most of the Grand, as an example, and I don't know what Susan's numbers are, I'm sure she will tell you. the Grand's funding, about 40% of it comes from contributions. And that's a pretty normal
That's standard,
number.
yep.
But out of that 40%, grants is probably
2%?
yeah, well, I was going to say
Really?
1%.
Yeah.
It's the local businesses,
Sure.
the local corporations, and the local individuals that make things happen, and make and so it becomes very much the idea that we still have to, no matter how great. If I employed a grant writer, I might get that number from 1% to 3%.
Is that right?
Yeah.
Is this different over the 20 years? Was there a time when there was more of this kind of money available?
It's different from state to state, and it's
State to
different. The state of Wisconsin is not the most generous at funding arts programming, and yet they were 7 or 8, 9 years ago. It was probably easier. And I know the Grand certainly received more funding in grants than is available to it now. Part of that is it's a catch-22. There are more little art centers popping up all over the state, and the state arts board is going to want to support the rural startup things, and that decreases the amount that's available for the rest of us. Certainly funding for the arts isn't going up.
Right.
But the
That
base
level.
here was small enough that it makes the divvying of the pie very, very difficult. I most recently came from Pennsylvania. That state has it down. I mean, they give, not that everybody gets everything that they would want, but you get a pretty decent portion of what it is you're asking for. And there are many different pockets of funding that you can apply for. So every state is very different, and it depends upon the commitment that they've made to the arts.
All right.
With the struggle for money being what it is, why do you think there are, as you just said, Joe, so many of these little PACs, if you will, popping up?
I have a perspective from the historic theater, and I don't know if Susan's is different, and I keep answering before you, I apologize.
That's okay.
I think often projects like the Grand and projects like these new, they're a crime of passion.
That's a good way to put it.
A group of people passionately make this work, and then one of two things happens. One is that people who realize that running an arts center is a business and needs to make itself work, either that group comes in and takes hold, and sometimes it takes many years for that to happen, or sadly these places are started up and they fall apart because we start to think, so many of these organizations have begun, and people who passionately believe it's going to happen will say anything to make it happen. They'll say things like, ticket sales will pay for this. If you give now, we'll never have to come back to you again. That just doesn't exist. The reality is, if someone asks me, do you have to give to the Grand? I say, yes. Year after year after year, and here's why. And what can you expect? You can expect me to come back to you and prove that we're worth you giving again. We have a responsibility too.
Yes.
You shouldn't give to the arts just because the arts are there and the arts are good. The arts have a responsibility to provide something engaging for the community that they're in as well.
Sure.
So
I want to come back to funding in just a couple of minutes, but I want to touch for a moment on what Tony was talking about why so many college students don't go. And I think that a lot of folks also don't go, whether they're college students or not, is because they have this idea, like many years ago, you had to dress up to go to the theater. And it's not that way anymore,
No,
is it?
It's not at all.
Not for the theater and not for the symphony.
No.
You can go in almost any attire
Yes.
that you are comfortable in.
I think it's
Exactly.
got a little bit to do with theater history. I mean, the Grand Opera House is called the Grand Opera House, not because opera was the thing. The Grand was called an opera house, like many of those opera houses built at that time, because the folks wanted to feel that they had a special place to go.
Yeah.
That's why those movie theaters in the 20s and the 30s were so palatial. They were a place for the common person to go to in their everyday clothes and feel like they were in this wonderful place. You don't have to dress up in the Grand because it's a Victorian opera house. That's exactly the reason why you don't have to dress up. It's because you go in there and you go, wow, I'm in somebody's parlor watching this great show. And now, as time goes on, it's kind of like you used to have to dress up for church too. You don't dress up for church anymore.
Now, you pointed at me when you said that, Joe.
I was Italian
You've
gesturing.
seen me at
I was Italian gesturing. And boy, you're right. It's one of the single largest struggles is I don't want to get dressed up to go to a show.
Sure.
Yeah.
Well, don't.
Yeah.
You know, we want you to wear clothes,
Yeah.
but outside of that, there's no requirement. You're exactly right, though. It's
Yeah.
such a. At the time, it was so important to feel special.
Yeah.
Now, the important thing is to feel accessible.
Well, like and yet you can dress up and not feel out of place.
Exactly.
Absolutely.
When I was up
Some
at the
people
PAC
do, yeah.
to see Riverdance this
Yeah.
past summer,
Yeah.
there were people there in shorts because it was summer and it was
Yeah.
a hot night. And you've got air conditioning,
Yes.
yes, but
Yeah.
people were in shorts.
Yeah.
There were people in jeans. There were people in casual, business casual.
Yeah.
And then you had folks in suits and
Yeah.
dresses and that kind of thing. And you know what? No matter what any of us was wearing, we all sat back. And when the house lights went down and the stage lights came
Yeah.
on,
Yeah.
everyone enjoyed the same
bet.
show
Exactly.
and had the same experience.
Yeah, exactly.
And it really was wonderful.
Yeah.
So, talking about funding, as we said, you guys are always struggling for dollars. And a lot of people view the arts as wants, not needs. And yet another segment of society says, well, if you have good quality of life things, including the arts, that is going to bring in more people to your community, thus build your tax base, thus build more development. And it's kind of like what came first, the chicken or the egg kind of thing.
Yeah.
And yet I think we all agree that arts are necessary. But Joe, you guys at the Grand, and this predates your arrival here, but the Grand has drawn on monies from the city budget for a lot of years, and some past and present council members have wanted to yank that. And you are trying to kind of wean the Grand off of that, are you not?
I think that's a fair statement. I think I don't think we'll ever be totally. I mean, as long as the Grand is the city's building, I believe that there's a certain responsibility that the city has to invest in making sure the building doesn't fall apart. By the same token, I think it is our responsibility to make that building and that operation as productive as it possibly can be. I have this discussion, as you can expect, with councilors all the time. What the trap really for us is to say, you have to fund us because we're here and we're important. And the truth is, if I can't go out and say, this is the Citizens Grand Opera House, and the $4 movies and the free lectures are every bit as important as the Jeff Daniels and the Debbie Reynolds and the stars and the modern dance and whatever it is I put on the stage. I have to have something for everybody to come and see before I can expect everybody to fund it. The Grand, truthfully, the city dollars cover about 75 to 80% of what it costs to operate the building. So in a way, there's a bargain happening here. And what we've failed to do in the past that we need to continue to do a better job of is pointing out that it's not taxpayer dollars who bring Shakespeare into town. Taxpayer dollars are making sure that building stays functional and in good shape
Meets
so that the
code.
foundation can bring Shakespeare in, or so that the high school kids can perform on it. would I ever go back and try to say, you know, and you know, we were in a budget crisis, I suppose, is the best way to say it right now. Would I go and say we need more because we're the Grand? No. Would I like that? Of course I would. It would make my job a lot easier. I'd be able to do a lot more. But my job right now is to continue to prove that we're worthy of keeping that building open, and then just engaging the city and saying, this is your building. When the air conditioning breaks, we got to do something about it. When the roof leaks, we got to do something about it. As for what happens in it, I'll do that. As for having the school kids come in and giving them a special rate so that they can come in, I'll do that. The Grand was the first successful public-private partnership in Oshkosh. And you know, we talk about that all the time as the way things get done. Right now it is. I think that at this moment in time, having the Oshkosh Opera House Foundation manage the Grand Opera House for the city is the best deal for everyone. We're out there raising 4 times what, you know, the city contributes to keep the building open. But I have to prove that every year.
Sure.
And I'm responsible for that.
Well, and I agree. I think it's only fair that as a landlord, since the city owns the building, they take care of maintaining it. But you know, we are in a budget crisis here, a really bad one. And you hear talk all the time from different folks about, well, maybe the city should sell this and this should be privatized. And I'm not suggesting that's what the city has recommended doing. Let's preface this by saying that. But do you foresee a possibility sometime down the road that the Grand would ever be privatized?
If you ask me as the individual director of the foundation, I'll give you an answer. Of course, I can't speak for the board of directors. I've certainly operated theaters where the foundation has owned the building, and it is a successful model. Would I see that in the Grand's future? I think it's something that can certainly be discussed, and that's probably what you're alluding to when you say I'm looking towards ways to ease the load, if you would, on the taxpayers. There's 2 functions of what the Grand does. So there's the tourism room tax, which I think is an important part that we earn and I would like to see us retain. And then there's the city's function of helping to keep the building from falling apart, which at the moment is there. Could I see that somehow? Could I sometimes see a scenario where the foundation owns the building, takes on that responsibility? Certainly. Does it happen immediately? Probably not, because there are a couple of concerns. When I talk about it with counselors, some of them are very thoughtful folks who want to save money and yet at the same time balance what the Grand is. The city's responsibility in turning it over to whether it's the foundation or another private entity is to make sure that the initial investment in restoring the building doesn't fall apart. That I'm not going to go in knocking down walls or doing something really crazy or painting the place purple, you know? And so there's a delicate balance to maintaining what the city would like to see the Grand's role be in the community with abdicating the responsibility for making sure that happens.
Sure. Susan, the PAC, not all that old. I mean, you're what, 5 years? 4?
We are in our 4th full season.
Okay. And you were built in very large part by corporate and private donations. Did you receive, I was going to say, did you receive any money from the city of Appleton at all?
Oh, yes. The city gave us the land and prepared the land. And I think that the value of that, I'm going to get caught on not having the figure on the top of my head, but I think it was over $2 million. And that was a huge contribution from the city. And their expectation was that the board, the founding board, would raise the money to build the building, which is what they did. And what's interesting about our financial model is that, you know, in many ways, I find it to be a more healthy financial model to start out with if you are going to be owned privately, is that you've got all of these individual and corporate investors. We had over 2,700 individuals and corporations all give money to fund the building. Well, right away, I have a huge subscription base. I have a huge investor base that's participating right away in this building. So rather than somebody writing a check and saying, here's the building, let's see what happens, or the city saying, here's the check, you know, in terms of a large contribution, we don't have that. We do get a room tax piece on an annual basis, which is wonderful for us to get, but we basically we operate on 78% earned income and 22% fund contributed income. So my job is to raise that 22% every year to try to make the thing all fit together.
And you do bring in a fair number of Broadway shows. Let me ask you, when you do bring in these Broadway shows, you know, these shows have different troupes. You know, you've got an A troupe and a B troupe and a C troupe. And why is it that the PAC doesn't ever have the big name actors coming in to do the Broadway shows? You know, it seems like it's the B list or the C list.
The big name actors don't tour.
Well, Hal Linden, Tuesday with Maury's, for example.
There was a cast
Tuesday
change
with
because,
Maury.
well, actually, he was slated to come, and he was substituted because actually his wife was diagnosed with an illness, and he
Okay.
had to withdraw from the tour.
And that's why Elliot Gould came in then.
Correct. Not
Okay.
Elliot Gould.
I thought it was Elliot Gould.
Gould is the Harold Gould.
Harold
Yeah.
Gould. There we go.
And Harold did a phenomenal job, but he was a substitute for that. But other than that, I don't think that there are any stars out there that we actually haven't had that, because we get the A tours.
Okay.
We get the #1 tour. And part of the issue in our industry, in the touring industry, is that a lot of the actors don't want to go out on the road for a period of time. Now this fall we're very excited because Richard Thomas and George Wendt are both going to be in 12 Angry Men. Richard Thomas, John Boy, and George Wendt, Norm from Cheers.
Oh, yeah.
And this show is getting rave reviews,
Wow.
and we're very, very excited. But that was one of the few shows where the stars decided, and they're A stars, and they decided to come out on the road and do a 30-week tour. Usually it's a much shorter time, and sometimes the stars will cycle through. So Molly Ringwald is going to be our star with Sweet Charity. So this year, actually, we're seeing that there are a few that are coming out, but mega stars, so that, you know, Denzel doing, you know, Julius Caesar on Broadway is not going to tour.
Isn't it true too, Susan, that sometimes the megastars, there's this other level of, for a Broadway show, where they'll go into Chicago or Toronto and they'll take over a theater for 6
A
months.
huge sit down.
And,
yeah.
and when that, and those megastars will often go with those shows because they're settled, you know, and they've got their family. I don't know, I think
Yep.
I've got that right.
Yeah, they'll do the multi-month engagements. But, you know, some of those shows, like Wicked, doesn't have named stars in it, but it's a great show.
In your programming decisions, do you avoid overly controversial work? Do you get pressure from your board of directors, let's say, to go easy on certain themes?
I think it's not so much pressure from the board of directors. I think it's input from the community. I do a really kind of aggressive research into the community when I start with 100 shows and let them vote, basically.
Right.
And it's not a strict democracy, obviously,
Okay.
but I'll stick a few controversial things in and see what the barometer reads. And usually the barometer falls off on me. Now that could mean that I'm not asking the right people.
Yeah.
That could, and we need to do a better job of asking around a little bit, and that is part of the goal. But
Do you get frustrated sometimes that you'll say, I really want to have a certain show come, but it's not coming up high in my surveys?
whether it's controversy or just personal taste, there's always an opportunity to say, wow, I really wanted this show. But that's I think the surest way to lose money is if I booked everything I liked. Would probably not
Well,
be a
that's
successful year.
the problem with capitalism in the arts, isn't it?
I think
have
I
to worry
usually
about-
I settle for there are a couple shows that I get that I really like, and there are a couple that capture my imagination. But in every season I've had at the Grand, and the 3 that I've booked, there's been a show that I never heard of that somebody handed me a tape and said,
Really?
I heard this group in Branson, I heard this group in Minnesota, or I heard this group at a bar, and give it a chance. And so,
Okay, to put the question a different way, Susan, do you feel pressured to do shows that you know are going to work? Shows that you know are going to put bodies in the seats?
You have to have a balance. You have to be able to say, if you operate on 78% earned income, you have to be able to trend to say, I need so many shows that are going to sell at X% to capacity. And that is going to balance with some other shows that I know I'm not going to sell 2,000 seats yet to an opera. But I still want to have that opera programming, and the people who love opera want to see the programming. Same thing with ballet. I know I'm not going to sell those 2,000 seats. The orchestra, I'm going to sell 1,300, 1,500 seats. but the commercial always balances the work that needs the subsidies, which is why I think it's a good partnership, because you're getting people also in the building, and then you're getting them to try something else.
If this is the break-even line,
Yeah.
for every opera I do, I need the Glenn Miller Orchestra.
Yep.
So that I come here at
Yep.
the end of the year.
Yep.
That's probably the best way. If you
Yeah.
when you ask it that way,
Yeah.
Yeah.
I clicked.
Yep.
And part of my job is to try to, especially with a 16-show season in Oshkosh, it's kind of one of everything.
Sure.
So
Yeah.
if I want to do a blues show that may only bring a couple hundred people in, I need to do that off-Broadway musical that's going to bring 500 or 600 in.
Okay.
And so that, and then I have to break even with 400 people.
Mm.
So that's the challenge.
Okay.
Right.
We're down to about 2.5 minutes here.
That was fast.
I
I
don't know
thought,
if I
how
have
are we
time
going to
for
talk
this
about
next question,
Shakespeare
but-
for an hour, and it's all gone away?
Well, I do have a question, and this was from someone who actually lives up in the Appleton area. And they said that because you've got electricians and so forth at the PAC that are unionized, there are some local groups, nonprofits and so forth, that can't afford to perform in that venue. Now, like I said, and they just asked me to ask the question. I mean, is that true? And if it is, what can be done to make it more available and affordable for groups like that?
Well, actually, I'm glad you brought that up, because we have a collective bargaining agreement with our union local, and we do have union stagehands run our house in terms of when the shows come in. And actually what that does is give everybody the best experience operating the best equipment, et cetera. So that's a good thing that we have that. We have several different tiers of usage fees that we charge out, and we actually raise money. Part of my 22% that I have to raise, I raise money to subsidize the use of our facility by people from the community, so that a commercial rate, just for off the top of my head, not exact numbers, a commercial rate might be a $5,000 rental for the space plus the labor charges, and somebody who's for a not-profit group, it might be $1,000, plus the labor charges. So I would say to people, our building, it's not like the high school auditorium where you turn the lights on and you just come in and you do it. It's a very big candy store with a lot of equipment in it, and you want to have the best people running that facility and running that equipment. That said, I would ask this person to encourage them to talk with me. The place can't be given away because there is a cost to doing it, but we raise money to support that cost.
Okay.
So many of the organizations who are local that do use our space, and trust me, we have like a day here and a day there that's not booked during the presenting season. So we have an awful lot of people who are in the space. But what they do is they reserve it for something special. It's a culminating moment, an anniversary, or some kind of a major event for their organization. And then they do the extra fundraising to be able to be in our building.
Okay. All
So
right,
it is
good.
fair to say that it does cost more, but we do find ways to assist the local community.
Sure. And we kind of ran into the same thing here with the Leach,
Yeah.
the Leach Amphitheater, where
Yeah.
local groups wanted to use it, and the cost was prohibitive
Sure.
for them. So, do you have anything real fast?
Just want to thank you both for your venues. When we interview faculty and staff at the UW, having the Grand Opera House and the PAC around is a big appeal to them. So thanks for what you do.
Thank you. Thanks for having us.
Thank you.
Sure,
This is
sure.
great.
So again, it's Shakespeare and the Fox.
Yes.
There are still events going on
Yes.
this month, October.
Yes.
Anything in November again? There's a couple things in November.
Yes, and with the symphony concert on November 5th.
And then
4th.
Nothing with respect to this particular series in December, and then you'll start up again in fall of next year.
Yes.
So. All right, very good. Thanks so much to
Thank
both of
you.
you. And Tony, thank you, and thank you for joining us. We'll see you next time. Until then, take good care and keep your eye on us. We've got our eye on Oshkosh.